Okay. Um, Good evening, hello, namaste, sat sri akal, and adab to everyone. I'm Aviral on behalf of ACM Bits Goa student chapter, a chapter established to destroy the barriers of branch and act as a hub for computer science and technology enthusiasts. Backed by a star-studded team of developers, competitive coders, designers, G-Soccer, and even council members, in the past 2 months, we've launched a GitHub organization accumulating the best student-focused open source repos and also the ACM Bits Wiki, which is holding the campus culture together even in the online sem. Over 100 plus students receive ACM Tech News thrice a week, and students of Bits Goa can avail that by subscribing to a mailing list. All the links are in the description down below. With that said, I officially begin this event. Welcome to the Day 2 of Getting Started series, a 5-day talk event to help students not only explore the field, but also talk about how to explore, where to explore, and even what is explored. The event is led by seniors from Bits Goa who have been in our exact shoes just 1 or 2 years ago and have now obtained amazing proficiency in their respective fields. Today, we are getting started with web development with Mehul Mohan. He is the founder of Codem, which is an online learning platform which offers a wide variety of courses and projects on web development by industry experts. Apart from this, he has also been a WWDC'19 Scholar and an instructor at Udemy. He is also a security enthusiast and has reported bugs in Google, Microsoft, Sony, and eSet. He also runs a successful YouTube channel named Codem, where he uploads tutorial videos and talks about engaging topics regarding web development. Mehul Bhaiya, you have the stage now.
Thank you so much, Aviral. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the warm introduction. Let's split this session, let's split this talk into two parts. The first part is where I'll just quickly rush you through over a very small deck, which I have, which will just keep us in order in the things which I want to discuss. And the second part is, which is I'm more curious on, is the FAQ part, where you will be asking questions, the most common questions which you feel, right? And make sure to make these questions specific in your case, because I mean, you can ask generic questions on Google, but if you're stuck with anything, I'm more curious on answering questions from the audience. So I'll just quickly share my screen to just show you a deck. Hopefully you will be able to see that. Aviral, let me know if there's any problem anywhere along the way.
Sure.
Okay. So sure. So let's start with web development a little bit, just to give you Aviral has done this job already, but just to give you a context on me, I've been doing web dev for more or less last 8 years. In some sense, I discovered web development when I was in class 7th, 8th, I think, through my blog, which we'll talk a little bit by the end of this deck. I'm the founder of Codem, which is also a YouTube channel and a learning platform. And we have recently raised a small amount of funding as well to build an interactive learning platform for the web, for the world, for different industry level skill sets. And of course, one of them includes full stack web development. I've also been working as a freelance developer. I'm not working anymore actively, but I used to work over 700 plus projects. I have done that on Fiverr, Upwork, Elance. I've written a couple of books on JavaScript and React, and I've been to WWDC'19 as a scholar, as a student scholar. So what exactly is web development? Let's break that down a little bit into why you should be even considering this as a field. So what I feel like right now, web is becoming more like an operating system for things, because you will see a lot of applications, even traditional applications, are shifting to web, right? Whether it's Photoshop in terms of Canva or Photopea, which is also a very one-on-one representation of Photoshop, whether it's just streaming services, for example, whether it's any particular software or anything you can see, a lot of things are transitioning on the web. So it's more or less becoming an operating system where your browser is your client, right? So it's a good time to be in the web development field, because you are able to create these applications on an OS, which when you create is basically accessible to anyone and everyone on the planet. So People used to think about web development as just working with JavaScript, HTML, CSS, but if you truly go into web development, it's much more than that. You have a lot of components, whether it's front end, whether it's back end, databases, working with cloud. And I would say all of this more or less comes in the same umbrella of web development. Because when you're working on a project on your own, which I used to do a lot of times, I'm just working on something on my own, I would need the knowledge of all of these different aspects, at least till a certain degree. So even though I'm trying to shape a project which you will eventually use from a URL, a simple URL, but still that involves a lot of components. That means it's not just coding, it's not just programming in some languages, but it's also about how you work with tools, how you work inside environments, how you work with cloud, how you work with infrastructure in general. So it's a much broader field, right? It's not something like learning Python. It's not something like learning a single language. It's more of a, you can say, learning a suite of things. So make sure you understand that it's not something you can learn in a week or in a month's time. It will take some time, and especially it will take a lot of experience building along the way. But it's possible, and you have to start somewhere, right? So we'll discuss where you can start. Where the simplest way to start is the front end part, how you start working with front end technologies, because this is like the simplest thing you can do. Just fire up your text editor, create some code in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, open it in a URL, your local URL, or just push it on GitHub, and you're done. I have actually written a small blog post as well, which actually goes into much more details of what you need to learn as a front-end developer these days. Of course, you don't need to focus on things like jQuery or Ember.js, because even on front-end, there's a lot of noise. So it's important you filter down the things you're learning, especially if you're in college. Obviously, you are. Because you don't have a lot of time to experiment. For me, it was fine. I started in way back when I was in school. So I had a lot of cushion of time to time buffer to just play around with technology, see which things are working, see which things are not working. But for you, I would recommend like sticking to some 2 or 3 best practices, some 2 or 3 learning paths, and then following them. We go a little bit into HTML, internet fundamentals, JavaScript, dev tools, Git. This is fine. You can find this blog. But the crux of the thing is that you need to stick with a certain set of technologies, because even in front end, although the major technologies are only these 3, there are a lot of tools, there are a lot of things built on these 3 technologies alone. And you don't necessarily want to learn everything, but you don't just want to get stuck with these 3 only, because in order to do anything meaningful, you need to move beyond these things. The next thing which I feel is important is, of course, if you are a single person or if you are a small team, you also need to learn about backend stuff, because backend is something where you actually deploy whatever you are creating on the web, and it could involve multiple components. You should be able to understand how the infrastructure should work, how the servers actually work, what is networking, what are port numbers, how to deploy a computer. That's fine. You don't necessarily need to learn this in one go, but eventually you need to acquire this information. Plus, this is like the infrastructure part and the cloud programming part, but there's also the programming languages and frameworks things, right? Now, this is something which people get stuck up, and they're just confused. You should learn Python, you should learn Django. I believe this question is irrelevant. You should learn anything you can at the moment, whatever you like. If you have been working with Python for some time, you might want to just stick to that. If you're working with JavaScript on the front end and you want to switch to Node.js on the back end, it's fine. The more important thing is what you do with these things. A lot of people know a lot of things, but they're not able to link these things together and build something meaningful. And that's the end goal. That's the thing which you want eventually. So the tools are just a means to create something. So don't worry a lot about what you're learning, but worry about what you're doing after you're learning these things. Databases, again, the same question. NoSQL, SQL, MySQL. What should you learn? MongoDB. MongoDB is bad. NoSQL is good. SQL is good, things like these doesn't matter, especially in initial stages when you're not working with scale-based technologies where these problems actually exist. Just pick up something, learn about the fundamentals, implement it, ship it, and get feedback, which is also something we'll take a look at. And plus, web security is also something which I believe a lot of people miss out on. The easiest way to actually just start with web security is to understand that all user input is unsafe. Whatever your users are sending to your backend is absolutely unsafe. It could be arbitrary code, it could be garbage. So you cannot ever trust your user input. That means you always have to sanitize whatever you are receiving at your end. This is the, I would say, the most important rule of working inside of web security. But there are, of course, a lot more things that go into that. But even if you just start with that premise that you're not able to trust, you should not trust any sort of user input, you should be fine. This should allow you to build super secure apps compared to what is present right now on the web. And yeah, of course, after you have done front end, after you have done back end, you have a little bit of idea about how you can deploy things. I mean, now it's super simple with the addition of things like Netlify and Vercel and these cloud providers, but still the OG players like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, you should learn about these things also eventually, because if you're building any sort of product or any sort of project which you want complete control over end to end, in some cases, which might be a bad thing, right? You don't necessarily want an end-to-end control over your single HTML static page. That just doesn't make sense. But for some projects, maybe you do want to have that. So having a cloud provider, having an infrastructure as a service, like AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, these things would really help. And I mean, that's just another skill set as well on your list, because even if you're not building your project, even if you're applying for, let's say, some company or somewhere, most of these startups, most of these companies use any one of these major cloud providers. So if you have experience to show as a web developer, you already got bonus points in front of them. And except for the fact, like, I mean, these AWS, Google Cloud, they also provide you with the ability to create your own servers, like EC2 instances, which are just, virtual computers, but they also give you the option to manage these services for you. Like, for example, S3, which is a very popular service for storing files online, is a managed service by AWS. So you don't necessarily need to worry about the disk space, the S3 server crashing, the files not getting available. So using these managed services, knowing a little bit about them, can also speed up your development time, right? So the next time you're building, for example, trying to build a social network for some sort, like we had Grad Capital, right? So you have certain tools, certain managed services from these cloud providers, which you can immediately hook into and just focus on the business logic of the things. And then you have the serverless part for scale. Like, if you really want to make your code stateless and scale to a lot of people and not crash, then these things exist. But this is like way ahead of what you should be doing if you're just getting started with web development. Let's see. So career as a web dev, I mean, if you're starting it right now, you should be focusing more on, you probably would be focusing more on what is the outcome, right? And I'll tell you that if you are enjoying web development, that's a great thing. But even if you're not at the moment, and if you want to just get into web dev, there are a lot of benefits of getting into web development right now, because as a person who is able to deploy a product which people can use end to end, it is a huge skill to have. You can get hired, like I said, startups, and I mean, recently funded startups I know in my Antlers cohort as well. And I have talked to a lot of people. They are always looking for great developers, right? So the notion, I mean, of course, BITS is a university where you have to get a job in order to, I don't know, like be, you're just obliged to just get a package of 20 lakh, 25 lakh, 30 lakh to be considered good as a CA student. But just telling you that the reality of the real world is that a lot of people are looking for you, even if you don't have the DSA competitive skills and if you're just good enough with your web development skills. These startups are looking for you, right? I have hired a person who's in second year of some college in Maharashtra, and he's still a undergrad, and he's working full time on Codem, and I had no idea about his DSA skills. So people like me exist. People, startups like Codem exist, which are looking for people like you. Or the best part is that you can create your own careers out of this as well, right? I'm a web developer. Honestly, I had no business sense. I had no business idea, and maybe this is a little bit out of context. But when I applied for Antler back in January, the only thing I had to show them was my work, which whatever we have done on Codem so far. And in January, I did not have these full-time people working, right? So they still bet on me, not because I'm from Bits, not because I'm from, here and there, but because they're able to see some proof of work that, yes, this person is able to build something, and the only things missing here is guidance and teams and stuff. So it's possible to create your own careers, not as serious as like running your own company, but also like as a freelancer. For example, I did a lot of freelance projects when I was in school and even in college, and it really helps, right? I mean, of course, it goes without saying that you can earn a lot of money, but yeah, that's also a career option, and you will be able to make a lot more money if you are serving clients from US, UK, these tier one countries, basically where they pay a lot more compared to just Indian companies or freelance agencies. Then Apple WWDC is here because, to be honest, again, a small story. When I was applying for WWDC, preparing an application, I had no idea how to work with the tech stack, right? And Apple requires you to learn Swift. They require you to learn Xcode, work with Xcode, publish applications on iPad or Xcode, and then do that. So I was only able to learn a lot of Swift UI, Xcode stuff, and create an application around it in the span of 10 days because I had prior programming knowledge. Now, this does not relate to web dev, but the fact is that if you have a lot of understanding about various systems, front end, back end, cloud, DevOps, how they connect with each other, you will eventually become a good programmer in general. And a good programmer's tendency is that they are able to switch to different contexts, switch to different languages very easily, right? So if you give me like a few weeks time, I could also try to learn about mobile application development, understand the architecture, how the Kotlin or Java or Objective-C, for example, is working, and we can get started with that. Because once you understand some industry level skill set, you would realize that a lot of knowledge is transferable, especially for things like backend, right? Backend always remains same, whether you have any sort of front-facing client, whether you're building a game, whether you're building an app, whether you're building a website, the backend remains same. So a lot of learning can be transferred, right? So that's what I'm trying to do. But with things like competitive coding, of course, you have a career, you get a job from on-campus placements or even off-campus placements. But the thing is, usually you will realize, if you haven't realized yet, that you would not be working on what you're learning in competitive coding, right? So if you get a job, you would probably be working on these same things or some variants of this, right? You might be in ML, you might be in MLAI stuff, you might be in mobile application development, you might be in some sort of testing, but you definitely won't be solving two problems where you have to compute the distance between 2 points with some Dijkstra algorithm. You would not be doing that, trust me. So, I mean, a career as a web dev is especially was a no-brainer for me at the time I started. And to be honest, I did not really think about this as a career as well when I started, which let's discuss in my journey of web development, just to give you a quick idea of how I came into that. So like I said, I started when I was in class 6th or 7th, I think. That's when I first got internet access as well. So what happened was I was seeing how to create blogs, right? How to create blogs online, how to write content. And I used to wonder how I can copy paste the widgets from other websites, subscribe box, live visitor count, copyright notices in footer, stuff like this. So this was my first introduction to HTML and CSS. And this was just out of pure interest, right? I was just purely interested in doing these things. One of the things which I now in a hindsight, which seems like which went really well for me, was I always had fun while doing web development, right? Always had fun while working with code. I had tried competitive coding as well. I had tried DSM, this stuff in class 10th round. I participated in Google Code Jam, even got in the first round, second round, but eventually gave up on that, eventually gave up on mobile application development, eventually gave up on ML AI as well. Because these things, these industries just didn't stick with me. For you, it might, for you, it might not. So you have to figure out where the fun lies for you. And it necessarily might not be just programming, right? But you're just talking about programming because that's the theme of the call. But yeah, that's something I think you should figure out in terms of what your fun part is, and do that. Because if you're just doing it for the sake of money, sure, you can get money, but you're probably passing on an opportunity where you also have fun and you can also earn money. So I mean, especially at this point, if you're in first second year, you have a lot of time, play around with a lot of things, not just for the focus of building a career out of it, but also seeing things which really interest you, right? And trust me, I think not a lot of people say this, but it is not wrong to do something which not other people are doing, right? um, in a hindsight, if you get successful, or if you are able to get what you're trying to do, then people will actually try to follow you eventually. And even if you're not, then who's counting? I mean, you can always get a job, and plus all of you are from bid, so you already have that safety net available to you, right? Where you can just fall back to your degree and tag name and stuff like this, which usually works in India. So that's a plus point for all of us. But yeah, my web dev journey was mostly around pure interest and pure curiosity. So I would urge a lot of people here to figure out if web dev is even their curiosity or not, or if you're just doing it out of pressure of friends that some other people are doing, or you just want to get a couple of projects on your resume for interview. Then that's probably not the best way to go about, because you will lose interest. That's the point. There are high times and there are low times, and people who stick to low times are the people who actually have interest in something which they are doing. So that's the punchline. In terms of how to get started with web development, the idea of Codem was started with actually making a structured approach for web development. I'm personally working on the full stack learning path, but the idea of Codem is more about interactive learning across multiple industry level coding skills. So I'm not sure how many people actually even know about what exactly is going on with Codem. We started with full stack web developer right now, but what we are trying to transition into, and this is like a shameless plug right now, is transition into a platform where you have multiple industry relevant skill sets, like full stack, like mobile application development, like blockchain. Blockchain is something which another creator is working on, like data science, stuff like this. And this should be structured. This should not be like just a JavaScript course. This should be structured from 0 to 100. Again, this is a WYP, work in progress. But yeah, that's the end goal over the next few years, to have all of these learning paths up and running and maintained with proper technologies, the relevant technologies of today. Because like I said, there's a lot of noise, especially I know about full stack web dev in web development in general. But I believe there would be a lot of noise in other areas as well, like Python and backend development with Python and data science. So figuring out the correct way, the correct roadmap for people to learn that is a priority here. And of course, this is backed by interactive learning. That means we just spin up a full, environment for you to practice, which is like a playground interface. Not sure how many of you have used something like this in the browser, but this is like common with companies like Replit and Code Sandbox doing it. But we are also doing it on a different level, where we personalize this experience when you're learning. So when you're learning, you are actually practicing things as well, not just watching one video after another. So that's kind of the platform USP, right? But yeah, I mean, if you don't want to go ahead this route, definitely there are other options which exist: YouTube, Udemy, Google, blog posts. This is something, of course, I used. I did not use Codem to learn. But yeah, these things take time. What I have seen is if you're not sticking with codedamn or any other resource which is structured, then you will be stuck with one after another. You have learned JavaScript, what next? You have learned React, what next? You have learned Next.js, what next? So figuring that out part is possible, but that would require you more attention. The next thing is super important stuff, practicing and building stuff along the way. This is like maths. I mean, all of you have most likely done integration and differentiation in class 11, 12, and you know that you cannot learn these things by just reading the textbook, right? You have to practice a lot of problems. You have to actually put your pen on the paper and start writing the problems. Similarly with programming, I'm not sure uh, why people don't realize this, but this is all about practicing and building that experience. And the more you write code, the more it happens, right? And that's the motivation of Codedamm's interactive learning as well, because we don't want you to just watch the content one after another. We actually want to make sure you're also practicing. So practicing and building and getting feedback from others is also important, right? Whether you're doing it right or wrong, because you don't want to get good at the wrong thing. That's what not you want to do. So this is my quick recommendation on how you can get started in terms of like this is common, right? You guys all know. I don't think I need to tell you, go to YouTube and search for courses, or go to Udemy and search for that, or go to DC and download all these courses. But yeah, that's you have the answers. It's just that you have to be disciplined a little bit. Put down, your heads for some time. Just sit down and learn these things and build something. Get feedback from others along the way. And I mean, in college, this is like the best time to be learning web development, right? Because uh, you can build so many tools. I mean, you guys are not in hostels right now, but when you are, you can build so many things for other people. Like uh, my friends used to build what do you call that, exam schedulers, or deciding your timetable, uh, building scripts to automate ERP and stuff. And if you have these scripts, you just have to build the front end UI of these things, right? You can host your local servers on LAN, for example. That's how DC also works, right? So learn about all of this. Web dev, this internet, this networking is kind of like the gateway for you to build tools for others and get feedback eventually. So yeah, I mean, this is a very practical field to be in if you're somebody who likes to immediately see their work output in terms of how people are using it, what people get. So yeah, that's something I think you should be trying to do more. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share in terms of this presentation. But would love to take any specific questions, any contextual questions which you have, to dive deep into what problems you are facing or where I can help.
Thank you, Via. That was a very detailed talk about getting started with web development and what all a beginner can cover. We have a few questions flowing in, and also a few questions that have been pre-submitted to us. I will start with them. With all these different tech stacks, frameworks, and databases, etc., what's the best choice for a beginner to start?
There is no best choice. There is recommended things. So the best choice, again, just like programming languages or even industries, nobody asks what is the best career in life, right? So it's a similarly but a less serious question for web dev. You have to pick up a tech stack which you like personally. And most of the people, obviously, you don't have any option but to start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But after that, try to work with a few frameworks, the popular ones, React, Vue, Angular, these things. And once you figure out you are liking that part, then stick to it for a long time. Don't just use something for a couple of weeks and then jump to another one, because that is not enough time for you to actually absorb any relevant information in that framework. So there is no best path, but there is a recommended path, which is also something I share in the full stack web development learning path on Codem. and you will find opinionated things from all across people. I am a React developer personally. I use React and the ecosystem tech stack, so I can recommend you that. But that in no way means that Vue developers are bad, or that stack does not work. Like I said, there are tools. You have to work with tools to make the product is the end goal, not the process how you get there.
Thank you, Bhaiya. Another question we have is, how much well versed do I need to be with DSA in order to start with and proceed with WebD?
I think you know the answer to that. It should not be a lot. DSA is fine. DSA stands for data structures and algorithm. The problem is competitive coding. You should not be very serious about competitive coding. You should not, as in, you don't need to be very serious about competitive coding if you're getting into web development. Data structures and algorithm is something which is anyway going to help you in any field or anything you pick up. Arrays, strings, linked list, not so much, but these common operations, loops, variables, this stuff is like universal. So it's fine. You're sticking with DSA, but like don't spend 10 hours a day on competitive problems.
Thank you, Bhaiya. The another question we have is, we often hear that the field of web development is saturated with too many web developers. What is your opinion on WebD as a field of future?
It's not saturated. That's the good thing. It's not saturated if you only look at good or great web developers. That's the problem. We have a lot of web developers, but we still have a lot more companies who are looking for same. So what's the problem? The problem is that the entry level is so low in web dev now because of the explosion of resources plus internet plus people starting off with one HTML doc or one CSS doc and calling themselves web developer, that you see that a lot of web developers are there. But if you actually look deep into the data, most of the people are not that good, right? So that's where your edge lies. Your edge lies in terms of the clarity you have on things, your your grip on your tech stack, whatever that tech stack you're choosing, and the time you have spent so far on that tech stack building stuff. Most people can create HTML docs. Most people can understand a little bit of CSS. Some people can work with JavaScript, but a lot fewer people can actually just link a lot of these technologies together and build actual meaningful products. And I think these three technologies in itself is enough to do a lot of things. But still, you will find when you interview a lot of people. I have interviewed 100 applications last month in the first week of last month, and I mean, I know like the level right now in terms of web development, it's not good. It's easy to become expert, but you need time. You need to spend time. You need to have interest in what you're doing. So the future is definitely there with with a lot of offline and local businesses also coming online. So you have a lot of opportunities for freelance, for new businesses coming up. But yeah, that being said, it does not mean that you will be able to just get away with 2 weeks of preparation. You need to have some experience. You need to have some interest, and yeah, it'll take time, but it's definitely possible to break into web dev.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. Another question we have right now is, once you start WebD, what are the possible paths you can take and how to maximize on returns?
Possible paths, you can take anything. I'm running a company, so that's one path. Second path is, of course, getting a good paying job in startups or in mid-sized companies who actually need web developers to build their initial products, right? Not just maintain, but build the features. Um, then yeah, like I said, once you get into an industry, it's easy to also switch industries, because as a programmer, there are a lot of parts which are transferable. Knowledge transfer is real in the programming field. So yeah, it opens a lot of doors. You just have to make sure you are not just bullshitting yourself that you know something, but you actually should know the things you're talking about. Yeah, that's important.
Um,
So I think if it depends on what kind of level you are also as a developer. For me, for example, if I'm learning something right now, because I already have a lot of experience with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and these technologies, I usually jump to documentation. Then if I'm not able to figure out something, then I would go to some video or something. Plus, I always have a use case in mind, right? So if I'm learning about Docker, I'm actually trying to containerize some environment. So having a use case for what you are learning is first thing very important. You would lose out interest real quick if you're just learning it for the sake of it. So try to bind it with some use case you have. Second, if you're just starting off, I would not recommend jumping to documentation and type definition and things like these. Not just don't go down that route. You probably need someone to just walk you through. So a mix of videos. I mean, that's what Codem is also, right? That's the idea of Codem, that a mix of videos plus practice should be there. Somebody who just talks you through what is what, and then you also have an editor you on your computer, in the browser, whatever, to actually practice what you're doing. Because when you write code, you build that muscle memory where you would be able to transfer that muscle memory to your own personal projects offline when you're building them. So whenever you're starting, until and unless it's not just a complete tool-based thing like Chrome DevTools, for example, you cannot really code Chrome DevTools, you have to use them. You should always be writing code, and on the side, have some sort of person to walk you through. Documentation is also fine. I mean, there's no one hard and fast thing. You can have an documentation open on the side. But yeah, to start off with something, I would say to get the bigger picture, just stick to somebody who's teaching you that. That's good to know.
We have another question here. I see a lot of boom for static site generators these days, like Gatsby or Next.js. What exactly is different and better than normal sites here?
You don't have to worry a lot about the Jamstack or static site generation, to be honest, because Gatsby, Next.js, if you're learning React, for example, and you are good with React, these things would take you just a few days to transition. So just taking a React code base, for example, and assuming that it's a person-sized project, it would not take you a lot of time to even learn Next.js and transfer your code to that. But that being said, there are obvious advantages for static site generation. One of the most prominent one is speed for users, the end users who are using your application, because these static site generators just create everything statically. So there's a minimum JavaScript to execute. The pages are hosted on CDN, so its response time is faster, and so on. But the crux of the thing is that they are more beneficial. I mean, there are some parts which are also developer friendly, but usually the most benefit which people receive are on the other side of the table, which are actually using your product. So if you're learning something, if you're doing it for building your skill set, it does not matter, to be honest. Start with anything, start with React, create React app, whatever. And yeah, you would be able to transfer that eventually. So don't really worry about all this tech hell which is going on. It's fine to start with the basic things.
Thank you, Bhaiya. That was a comprehensive answer. Another question we have is, some people say that you should watch the whole tutorial before building anything significant. And some say that watch only 40 to 50% of the whole tutorial and then start building. What is your preferred approach in your opinion?
I mean, I don't know. I would probably watch a full video first, because you never know what the creator or author says by the end of the video, which might be helpful. You don't necessarily want to start with half knowledge, because then you will be just, if you're stuck with something, you'll be Googling it, which is fine, which is part of the process. But, you know, there's a famous, a popular meme as well. I spent like 6 hours debugging because I could not spend 10 minutes reading the documentation. So that I think applies here also. So, I mean, try to take up all the knowledge you can first. That's always a good thing. But yeah, don't get stuck into tutorial hell. That does not mean you should just keep on watching stuff and not building, and you should balance that. And that's your call, how much you can balance in terms of like how much you can consume at once and then use it, then consume at once and then use it. So it's your call. But yeah, I won't like if it's a 10-minute video, then it doesn't make sense to just skip at 5 minutes. So
Or just go to Codem and start learning.
yeah,
That will work great.
yeah.
Okay. This one is a funny question, light-headed question. What was your most embarrassing moment while being a web developer?
Most embarrassing. I don't know, like most embarrassing. There were a lot of moments. I mean, the recent one I would say was I was trying to use Codem, and I think last year when we started using Codem for the labs, for the CP labs and DSA, not DSA labs, but CP labs and the OOP lab. Of course, I was a web developer and I was very confident with my skills. And, I have designed this architecture where people can practice and do all that stuff. And I went to the lab of 100 students. And then when I realized that what's the power of 100 people coming directly to your website and launching a container which is running. And to be honest, I learned a lot of things about architecture and infrastructure last year itself. But yeah, then people joined and the and the server crashed and in front of 100 people, and I was like standing there in the lab and I was trying to fix something. It wasn't embarrassing because I was kind of like prepared for it, because I knew like I'm just running an experiment, although I cannot say that to the profs at that time that it was an experiment. But yeah, that's something that recently happened. But yeah, in terms of other things, I think canceled orders on freelance website because I wasn't able to do something. I did not know how to do it. There were a lot of moments, right? So it's not like you're always 100% perfect all the time.
Yes, I've been there during the labs in one of the CP labs when we were making the shift to Codem, and the platform is amazing, but yeah, server problems, those were unexpected.
They are definitely fixed now. I mean, the architecture now is completely done. So
Yes, of course. The another question we have, and it is a hot topic on LinkedIn: is it good to take unpaid interns to gain experience?
I don't think so, honestly. I mean, it's not even about paid or unpaid. I think you can learn a lot of things on your own also. Like if you just want to gain experience, it's fine to know what's happening in the industry, but you can gain a lot of experience by working on your own as well. And if you want to earn money on the side, I would say try freelance platforms instead of unpaid internships, because there you can actually just screw up as well. And the worst that could happen is somebody just cancels your order. It's not like you would be held accountable or this or that would happen. And the best way to start is start with small volume orders, right? $5, $10, $15. You don't want to pick a $2,000 project and then fail miserably at it. But yeah, in terms of gaining experience, I think I gained a lot of experience while working on these projects on freelance websites. But yeah, unpaid internships, I'm not sure. Like if you're trying to build a network, if you're trying to penetrate into a network of people, then it makes sense. I mean, I would definitely do an unpaid internship for Gary Vee, for example. But yeah, I mean, it's your call at the end of the day. You have to just come up with what you value more: the network, the money, the time you're putting into. I'm not saying it's good, unpaid internships are good, but if it's one way to just get to some person, then it might be just worth it, right? But yeah, it's your call at the end of the day.
Thank you, Bhaiya. I will club the next two questions. They are of similar nature. What are the challenges you faced while building Codem? And what technologies, what does it take to build something as big as Codem?
I think in terms of challenges, all the people in BITS know that when the first lab was conducted. So obviously the biggest challenge was building an infrastructure and building the whole pipeline of how these dynamic containers will be allocated or not. Because with the online code judges, it's easy, right? If you're on Code Chef, you just write your code, hit the run button, they spin up a container for a few seconds, few milliseconds, whatever, and then that process dies out. But with platforms like Replit and Codecademy and Codedamn and these platforms which provide long running sessions, there was a huge problem because you had to dynamically scale up and down not the servers you are using, but actually the servers which other people are using on your systems. And Kubernetes, these tools I knew were names, certain names, but I had no idea how to work with them. So developing a full architecture plan and design and deploying it on cloud, auto scaling up and down, all of that was the biggest challenge, I would say, in terms of product. But yeah, in terms of business side, this is like nothing. Now you have a business where you have to advertise to people and get revenue and answer to investors. So there are a lot of aspects. So that was the challenge. And in terms of technology, I think nothing fancy in terms of technology. We are not using any state-of-the-art programming language or anything, but definitely sitting on the giants of shoulders help. Sitting on the shoulders of giants help. Like AWS, for example, handles a lot of serverless architecture for us. So we don't have to worry about scaling up and down those backend services. We have S3, like I said, for managing storage and stuff. So the common things which exist in the scale world are definitely there. But one part which we have to develop from the ground up, from 0 to 100, was that practice part, the infrastructure part, which has basically no component in between, which is handled by anything apart from our team and the infrastructure basically by AWS. So yeah, I mean, it's possible. It was hard at some point. I even thought like, I'm not even qualified to think about an architectural design like this, but just hitting my head on the wall for a long time last year really gave answers. So I won't recommend that, but that's something you need to, with some problems, you need to spend a lot of time, right, to figure them out. So yeah.
Thank you, Bhaiya. This journey of Codem is surely inspiring, and we've also lived it vicariously and on campus as well, while going through all the labs and seeing you develop this architecture side by side as well. This is truly inspiring. I guess Devesh has a question. Yeah, Devesh, go ahead, please.
I think the first thing I had was always some sort of reason why I'm learning a technology or some framework or some concept. The reason was usually because I wanted to build something around that. So like I said, even when I started web development, HTML, CSS, that was because I wanted to copy a subscribe widget and change the colors. So that is number one, like figure out a project which you know is possible, kind of, but you don't know how to build that yet. That's like the best way to learn things, and then figure out what things you need to learn. So that way you probably cannot get stuck into tutorial hell, because the moment you realize, oh, this is something I can use now to take one more step forward, you would go back to your code and start implementing it, and then come back and then learn that stuff. Second I think which was my cheat code was actually Codem YouTube channel itself, because what I would do is I would teach people how to code, right? And when I was teaching that, I didn't even know what the next video would be or what the next concept should be taught. I think teaching is very powerful in some ways, because you are forced to actually reflect back into your own concepts and your own things. So would recommend, like, if you can just form a group of 3-4 friends who actually just take a day in a week, and just teach something to each other, right? That sounds like weird, but you can do something like that in terms of just making sure you're giving the best. I think we used to do that at Blitzkrieg, not teach, but actually discuss a certain vulnerability or certain thing. So somebody has to come up with DNS, for example, how DNS works or how the HTTP protocol works. So we used to do these events in the club. But yeah, I think you can similarly do this among your friends. And plus, I think, yeah, sticking to a end goal or some sort of goal is also important. Like if you're starting with web dev, I think the first goal you could have is building your own portfolio page and getting it live on GitHub, or just converting your resume into an HTML page, and then sending it somewhere, right? And the layout and the paths you can just keep the same. But once you have that, now you have a certain direction to go into. You have to learn about layouts in CSS. With layouts, you will discover, oh, I need to learn about Flexbox or grid. I need to learn about colors, backgrounds, width and height, these things. So you're not just learning for the sake of it, but you're learning towards working towards a goal. So figure out an anchor which you can just point your eyes on and then work towards that. That should work.
Thank you, Bhaiya. With that, we end our question answer session for now. Do you have any closing thoughts for our audience?
I think I'll just stick to, again, the same thing I have been saying over and over. Don't listen to a lot of seniors, because some people just, people will tell what they are doing, right? I'm telling you what I'm doing. I did not listen to seniors. Some people who are saying, just go ahead and do this and that, they have done that in past. People usually preach what they have already done or what they want to do. So yeah, I would say, like, be open-minded in terms of your career options, what you can do, what you cannot do, and don't let people tell you that something is infeasible or something is not possible. If somebody, even if at least one person has done it, or somebody, or that this is possible in other country or in other areas, then it is possible here as well, right? So just don't get stuck into the notion that there is just one way to win, whatever win is for you. There are multiple ways to win. Just figure out which way you would also enjoy while working. Yeah, I think that's all. I think most of the people, you are in first year, second year, third year, even third year, you have a lot of time on your hand before actual placements and things start. So just set up something of your own, right? Because if you have something, the only reason I was also able to take a decision of not setting into placements, because I had something by that time. It's extremely hard to take a big decision like not setting for placements, or doing something of your own if you're just getting started at that point. But if you have set up something, maybe it's a network, maybe it's a product, maybe it's something which you can use. In my case, I had no network, but I had something building on the side. For your case, you might be talking to a lot of people that you actually know that you can just get a job from any of the people. You can speak to that person, you can connect to that person, and then get placed or start something of your own or something. So use the time you have to build a time-based leverage. Time-based leverage, I think, is something which can only be acquired over a long period of time. Like, knowledge is one thing, experience is one thing, network is one thing. So these are the things which actually set you apart from the crowd, because skills and resume building and these things are very common, and you would see a lot of people are doing it already. So figure out what people are not doing and try to take as many intersections of those, like you are doing this and this and this and this. And if you get to enough intersections, like 4 or 5 good things, I think you would be like, you could be a very valuable person for others, for yourself, for basically anyone you want to work for.
Thanks a lot, Bhaiya. This was such an insightful talk, and this is your journey as well as of Codem inspires and motivates students and our audience to commit ourselves to a cause. And I personally enjoyed this a lot, having this conversation with you. Thank you for joining us today. And I guess we can go offline now. Yes,
Sure.
Bhaiya.
Thank you.